who's to blame for this problem that I'm in? And it was a very interesting moment of realizing there wasn't anybody to blame. It was just me. I was the problem, but fortunately, I was also the solution. And realizing that there weren't people to blame for the things that were going on in my life, and that I needed to take greater ownership for all the things around me. And that was a complete light switch moment. And the trajectory of my financial success from that point forward was radically different.
Hello, Ginny Bolling here with Pivotal REI, the real estate investing podcast brought to you by Pivotal Real Estate Investments. And today we have Charles Covey with us. Charles, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, I always talk with the guests for a bit before they come on, and I am pretty sure I met you 2 or maybe even 3 years ago. And it was a great intro for me actually to the developer side of these deals, because I was really just getting into it. Launched my company in 2022. And as you and I were just discussing, you have a very interesting way of approaching your PPMs. And we're going to get to that. But first, why don't you stay right up here at the front? We're going to say this twice. What is the takeaway you want the listener to have from this interview?
Yeah, so I think that it's a very interesting time in real estate for us. And the projects that we used to do, let's say multifamily, the multifamily projects that we did in the last 10 or 15 years don't pencil the same way that they used to. Inevitably, this thing is changing very rapidly in front of us. And so the deals that we're going to have to do to make money over the next 10 years are going to be very different than the ones we did over the last 10 years. So it's looking outside the box and doing some of the interesting, unique approaches that we're going to talk about today to really find ways to make money in this space.
Right. So that's a little taste of what we're going to get into. I'm going to read his bio now, but suffice it to say that Charles has been in the business for a while. And so I will read the bio here. Charles is an entrepreneur, investor, speaker, consultant, and real estate developer who has a strong passion for empowering others to succeed. Known for his intellect, vision, and creative problem solving, Charles has helped business owners across the globe fix their biggest challenges. His business background would be starting in construction at 16 as a house framer. Charles learned the trades and can build nearly anything himself. Framing is a skill. I have learned that. He's managed the construction of projects totaling over $5 billion, including college campuses, public schools, skyscrapers, and giant multi-use developments. With an economics degree from Texas A&M University, the combination of real-world expertise and finance knowledge gives Charles an exceptional ability to work with the broad range of people involved in complex development projects. With a focus on large build-to-rent subdivisions, Charles and his team are vertically integrated to acquire land parcels, entitle, design, and construct across Texas. I am going to touch on the rest here. As an entrepreneur since age 7, Charles left the game of business and the ability to forge his own path at an early age. And he has, having built and run companies with as many as 130 employees, no stranger to scaling fast and building systems. Little known facts: enjoys hiking, hunting, fishing, and being outdoors. Works out 5 days a week, prioritizing nutrition, health, and sleep. In college, worked as a fly fishing guide in Alaska. Cool. On a hog farm in Iowa, and for a congressman on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Travels to visit art and history. Yeah, that's pretty diverse. That is. Who was it you worked with on Capitol Hill? Can I ask?
Yeah, so that was in the early 2000s. I worked for Congressman Ralph Hall from the 4th District of Texas.
Yeah, I don't know the background. I probably should have known that. You didn't ask that because it didn't help. But anyway, it's huge to understand politics, isn't it? To do that. I got involved in politics a few times in my life. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a
Anyway,
very
so
interesting perspective to have, having been on the inside.
it explains a lot of things. And as you know, most of my life I've been having to deal with government, so I'm
Mhm.
quite versed.
For sure.
Anyway, so So you got into it as a kid, right? You got into real estate, and so what made you want to become a developer?
Well, as if you look at my career trajectory, started framing houses when I was 16. So that's about the bottom of the totem pole, right? You can't start much lower. And so
So
from there it was always about
clean up
what's
here.
that? Yeah. So it was always about finding ways to increase my ability to earn, increase the size of the problems that I was solving. And as we look at my career trajectory, it was always about solving bigger problems and trying to find bigger paydays associated with those. So I managed large commercial construction projects. Then I had businesses for myself, grew those businesses. Now I buy businesses and I develop real estate. So it was always about stepping up to the next level, going from a framer to a manager to a business owner and then to a developer. So all of those have really just built on each other. And so that great degree of experience. I've made so many mistakes at this point, right? That critical mass of knowledge helps us really understand and navigate these scenarios on complex projects.
As you were talking about that, what I'm picturing is really you had a very critical job, whether you know it or not, probably in some respects, because you learned really fast. If things are not squared in the beginning, it's all bad news after that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good, good, good. All right. Well, so tell us what you're working on today.
So about you want to talk about projects in general?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so we're focusing on projects mostly in the workforce housing arena. And so that particular area is dramatically underserved. So if we look at the numbers in Texas, in that achievable housing range, there's about 675,000 unit shortfall just in Texas. And that number is increasing. It's going up by 25 or 30,000 a year. We're not even coming close to solving this problem. And that's a big issue. This particular group is this is the people that do the work. This is the people that are working in a restaurant or they're working in construction or they're doing the things that make the world turn. And in many cases, they don't have access to housing that they can afford. And I know in major metros like Dallas, when you have an affordable apartment or an affordable rental home, there might be 10, 20, 30 applicants for these units. And so building rental units in that space is absolutely needed. And that's where we're spending a lot of our time.
All right. And you have had to learn to pivot, it sounds like, too, from our prior discussion, because this market has been evolving, correct?
For sure. Yeah. When we started this particular fund, we assumed that we would do land entitlement and build multifamily projects. And things definitely shifted, right? The BTR space was emerging at that time. We saw margins starting to shrink
Yeah.
with multifamily. So BTR in many ways is horizontal multifamily, but it's different in the way you design it. It's different in the way you build it. Similar in the way that you operate it to traditional multifamily. So as that space was evolving and evolving very quickly to become truly an institutional asset class, we're very involved in the BTR space and then finding ways in that evolving asset class to differentiate. Because there was a lot of money that was in that class early, and those projects were successful. They got on the ground very quickly, but that is still continuing to shift. We're seeing rents not quite as going up quite as fast as they used to be, and so finding ways even within that particular BTR class to the subclasses like workforce, for example, those are still underserved. And so it kind of goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, and focusing on that workforce housing element seems to be the most logical path towards profitability and to getting projects done over the next number of years.
Explain what BTR is.
Sure. So build to rent is BTR. So all of us know someone, let's call it 20 years ago, you knew an older guy that owned 10 or 20 or 30 rental homes that he had bought around town, and he probably puttered around in his truck and maintained those, and that was his retirement income. That scenario that was hard to scale. And some companies have tried to do that. We call that SFR, so single family rental. And SFR is a bit inefficient, but yet there's still a need for people to rent a home. Not everybody has the desire or ability to buy a house. And so in trying to scale this idea, it came to be that, okay, well, why don't we just build a bunch of homes together and manage them like an apartment complex, way more efficient than having to drive all over town to deal with these individual homes. So that's where the BTR asset class emerged. And over the last, let's call it 5 years, it's exploded. And that has become something that, because of the numbers are really good, typically better than multifamily. And typically, you're going to see a rent premium for build to rent. So this could be a variety of different structures. It could be a four-wall dwelling, say a cottage by itself. It could be a traditional home that looks just like any other home in a subdivision. It could be duplexes, quadplexes. It could be all kinds of different types of units, all kinds of different formats. And so I think finding the right format, the right form factor for your particular project is the real key. That's the artfulness of it, is to put the right product type in the right area that maximizes your returns.
Great, good explanation. Okay. So what is your project that you're working on now? How has that evolved?
We've got a few. The ones that are, I think, very interesting is the golf course redevelopments. So we've got two of those, one in Garland, Texas, and one in Pearland, which is outside of Houston. So Garland is right outside of Dallas. Pearland is right outside of Houston. So these projects are 150 to 200 acres, operating golf courses that aren't doing very well. Either they're not profitable or they've got challenges. And being able to go buy this infill property and develop units on it. And that's a great opportunity. We've been really fortunate to get some deals that weren't really available and get those off market in a way that was, sometimes it's challenging to get those bought, or there's the seller wants you to close immediately. We need cash in 30 days, and it's a great deal, so you find a way. And so those are fun projects to take on. But there's always, nothing special is easy typically. And so on those special deals, they're typically not easy. Take some work to get them acquired or to get them entitled. And so that's been a lot of fun. I think there's a tremendous amount of upside to buying golf courses that are aging, that are not doing well financially, but there's a lot of space there. There's a lot of dirt there that can be redeveloped.
Absolutely. So you're often, I imagine, dealing with HOAs that might have some interest in those golf courses, and or people bought equity memberships that you have to buy out. Is that what you're talking about?
We haven't had equity memberships, thankfully, but certainly we've got homeowner groups. So whether it's an HOA or a community organization of some type, they definitely have opinions and they need to be heard. They need to feel like they're heard. And so having community meetings, we had one recently. It was a wild time. There was a couple of old guys got thrown out by the cops. They had to call in reinforcements. It was spicy, to say the least. And what the real challenge was, it wasn't that there was an issue with the project. It was that the rumor mill had caused a lot of things to be said prior to the meeting. Oh, we're going to build Section 8 housing, and there's going to be drug dealers, and all things that were not true, not even close to true, not even adjacent to truth. But yet that's the information that had been passed around. So everybody shows up to the meeting and they're all upset and they're just angry and yelling and screaming. And by the end of the meeting, they realize, oh, well, this isn't so bad. The golf course is failing. It's the worst golf course in America. We do need something there. So, okay, this is a reasonable approach. So those meetings are fascinating, and you have to find a way to provide the things that the city needs, also try to meet some of the needs of the residents in the area, and then also deliver a project that is monetizable and that makes money.
Yeah, that's truly a situation like what you're saying, that you're trying to please many parties, and
Absolutely.
you said truly has the reputation of being the worst in America, right?
Yeah, yeah, terrible golf course. Something has to happen, and then it's about putting together a scenario. And that particular project took many iterations to get to a point where all the parties could really look at it and say, okay, yeah, we see what you're doing. This makes sense. This is something that we think is good for our area.
That's great. That's good progress. So do you want to talk more about that one or move on to another one?
Well, we can also talk about the mobile home parks, and I think that that's a really interesting one from a dollars and cents standpoint. We were not originally interested in developing mobile home parks. It wasn't an asset class that we had a particular desire to participate in until we looked at the numbers. And the numbers are completely undeniable that the profit margins there are really, really good, probably better than anything else we have access to at this time. So from that standpoint, it's very compelling. So then we had to get up to speed pretty quickly. What does it take to do these projects? And then we realized, wait a minute, this is very easy. This is mostly horizontal work, pouring some pads. We don't do park-owned homes as most institutional grade mobile home parks don't. The occupants own their home and they pay you rent every month to put their home on your lot. So then you're putting in the utilities and you're doing your horizontal, and that's it. So from an execution standpoint, dramatically easier than any of the things that we're used to. I'm used to building high rises and large projects. So from a construction standpoint, piece of cake, right, for us to handle. So we really like that element. And once we started studying it, we realized, okay, there's an absolute need for these. It is a little bit more difficult to get these done, to get them entitled, because a lot of cities, municipalities, and counties push back on it. They typically, because there's a difference. There's a modern mobile home park, and then there is a trailer park. Okay, so the traditional trailer park, run down, there's cars on blocks, there's the Bubba running around with his cut off jean shorts and a wife beater shirt, and those scenarios that you see in movies, they do exist, right? Those stereotypes exist for a reason, but that's of course not what we're building, and that's not what any of our contemporaries are building in this space. But people still have that idea in their head. So then it's about putting the right information out there, letting them understand, hey, this is a very nice park. It's amenitized. It's got a pool. It's got all the things that you would want a very nice apartment complex to have from an amenity standpoint. Great landscaping, very nicely managed, and there are plenty of good examples of that being done in Texas specifically. So being able to educate is super important there. And some of these parks are absolutely beautiful, and any of us would be happy to live there because they are very nice and they make you feel like it could be a home. So from that standpoint, it really became a no-brainer because we're already doing land acquisitions. We were already coming across properties that made sense. So now adding the mobile home park element to our arsenal was just a really great tool to have in our tool belt.
I get it. I get it. During COVID, I started flipping mobile homes so that I could know more about
Mm,
investing in parks and whatnot. And so yeah, and being in Florida, we do have a little of everything.
sure.
In Texas, when you're dealing with and you put together a park that has maximum amenities, what kind of a ground rent are you needing to charge for something like that there?
Yeah, typically we're going to see adjacent to a major metro. We'll use Dallas, for example. We're going to see 650 to 800 a month for that ground rent.
Okay,
And typically on the upper side of that, so 700 plus for something that's new and nicely amenitized.
nice. Yeah, yeah. We're above that in some of ours for sure.
I would bet. And I see, when I visit Florida, I love Florida, and I see the locations that some of these parks have. Like they're almost on the beach. These are phenomenal locations, so I can understand how the rents would be great there.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. And so we talked a bit, and I'd like to show some of your knowledge and expertise in the modular because you explained very well what's going on in that world. Can you share with us what you see as the practical use of modular
Yeah,
housing?
modular is fascinating, and that space is having it's
Yeah.
having a lot of troubles, and we've had a lot of money put into that space. There's been some extremely large private equity and venture-backed modular ventures that haven't worked out, and we're continuing to see that same pattern. The challenge is not that the idea is bad; it's that from a practical nature, it doesn't usually make sense from a dollars and cents standpoint, and it doesn't mean that it won't ever work. It just means that the ways that has been tried hasn't worked in most places. So I'll give you an example. Most of the fastest growing markets that really need the housing are in the southern US. Let's use the Sun Belt as an example. And in those markets, labor is relatively cheap compared to other areas of the US. We used the example when you and I were talking about New York and some of if we use New York and Chicago, union labor is more expensive. It's more expensive to operate in a city. The whole process is more expensive to build there versus in the Sun Belt. So in the Sun Belt, you've got that higher cost of building modular. It doesn't pay for itself in most cases. You can just build on site, traditional stick built like we've always done. That still is the most economical option in many cases, especially in the South where labor is more affordable. So for that reason, the modular options haven't worked well because the cost per square foot is just still too high. I hate that that's the case, but it just is inevitably. So I think at some point we'll find a way. Maybe AI helps us. Maybe it takes robots building these at some point to really make that make sense. I think that we're going to see over the next decade, we're going to see some really interesting ways to build houses. People have tried 3D printing and they've done all kinds of other things, but they're just not practical at scale. And so, still to this day, there's only a few ways to make the modular element or modular adjacent elements work. One way that we've tried that is effective is if you can get the walls pre-built. Let's say we're going to use steel framed walls are very effective for this. So you build the steel framed walls in a factory. Those are shipped out on a semi truck. You put those with a forklift. You put those all in place. You can get you get your walls up, and you can get your roof on pretty quickly in a couple of days. So there's some savings there. Similar material cost, a bit of time savings, a bit of labor savings, but it's not game changing, right? It makes a little bit of difference, but it's not enough difference to be as impactful as I think people would like. So someday I hope we see modular become more practical in the southern states, but at least for now, it's tough to make the numbers make sense.
That makes a lot of sense the way you explain it. And one of the things that I've been shocked about is there seems to be a lot of architects that are supportive of modular, and I did not expect that to be the case. So I wonder if it is going to be successful in the end. I for a while, and I still kind of think it might become the asset type of the decade. But now that we're in 2026, I don't know, it better something better change
Right. Well,
soon.
the other element to that is that modular, from a form factor standpoint, you've got to build smaller spaces. And I think we're going that direction. People are realizing, hey, you know what? I don't actually need a 2,000 square foot house. I don't actually need a 1,500 square foot apartment. That's not necessarily required for living. So I think we got over the last 30 years, we 40 years, we really got focused on that larger form factor. Houses got very big. And that's part of the reason they're very expensive is because they're too big. You go back to the 1950s and 60s, my dad was raised in a house that was about 850, 900 square feet. They seemed to be pretty happy at the time. They recall those times very fondly. In the photos, they all look happy. So apparently, you can live comfortably in a much smaller form factor. I think a lot of people are realizing that. So as we continue to adopt the smaller form factor, and all the major builders are building smaller on average. So as we gravitate toward a smaller form factor, maybe that helps us get closer to making modular work, but we'll see how that plays out. I'm definitely following it. I think that there's a lot of potential, but at least for now, it hasn't worked out.
All right. So the way that you are doing your projects, you create a fund, right? And people can invest that way.
Mhm.
Why don't you talk a bit about how that works, where they come in at and how the money works?
Sure. Yeah, we'll talk about that. So we use our investor dollars, our equity. That's part of our entitlement process. That's part of our initial front end on a project. And so I'll explain kind of the ideal way that this would work and the way that it typically works on our projects. So dollars come in. We either use those dollars to close on the land, or we use those dollars to provide the equity portion of a loan to close on the land. Now that land is then entitled, and then now we contribute that entitled land value as our equity contribution to build the project. So if you think about, I'll use some numbers of a specific project. So you buy a project at I think we bought one for 1.7. Okay, so we buy it for 1.7 million, and now we've got entitled land that might be worth 8 or 9 million. Okay, so now we can contribute that $9 million valuation as our equity to the deal. So let's say it's a 25 or $30 million deal. That $9 million land contribution is enough to cover our equity portion. And so it allows us to really leverage investor dollars to get the best returns.
All right. And to try to make that a little more plain English, talk about what entitlement is.
So the entitlement process involves all the elements that take place from raw dirt to construction. So that's going to be getting your zoning, getting all of the elements you need. You might have to annex into a city. You've got to take care of all of the utility elements to make sure you have somewhere for sewer and water to come from or go to, electricity, all of those different elements. You've also got to make sure that your plans are approved, both horizontal and vertical plans, and working with cities and municipalities, working with counties in order to make all those things happen, working with the Texas Department of Transportation for your entries and exits onto the road. All of these elements are involved. It takes a lot of time, a lot of coordination, a lot of people are involved. So you've got to have a good architect, good engineer, good consultants in order to make all this happen.
How long does it usually take in Texas for entitlement, roughly?
In Texas, it's much better. So we can typically get something done in a year to 18 months, although I would say that's extending. So let's call it 2 years is very realistic. And sometimes you might get, very rarely would you get one done in under a year. It's in theory possible. It just often doesn't happen if you have some back and forth, you have some changes. If you had the perfect deal go through very, very smoothly, you might be able to get it done in less than a year. From a national standpoint, that's much shorter time frame than some of the other states. California could take multiple years. I know guys that build high rises in New York. It might take them a decade to get all the things put together in order to build this project. So we are fortunate in Texas and some of the other southern states. I know Florida is pretty easy to build in. So that definitely allows us to keep cost of homes down because we can build cheaper here.
So, yeah, and cross-referencing for a moment, have you heard of the Live Local Act that we put together here in Florida? Are you getting talk about that over there in Texas?
Which one is that?
That's the one where it was to pave the way to make building multifamily faster, easier because
Ah,
of
yes. Yeah, I
oh,
heard something about this on LinkedIn, but I don't know the details.
I can fill you in. I helped lobby the legislators for it, so I can fill you in on it. But I was just wondering if it had gone to Texas. I've heard other states talk about it as well. But anyway, so yeah, and we constantly are having to lobby our legislators in state and federal level
Hmm.
about how are we going to catch up on our housing shortfall, right?
Right.
And so Trump has authored some things as well, and it's going to be very interesting to get all that interpreted over the next several months, right? So we're on top of it. I know you go to conferences and try to make sure that you're into best practices and keeping up with all that too. So um, I want to go ahead. We're getting top of the hour here and ask you go ahead one more time and talk about what you want people to take away, and then we'll go close out.
Yeah. So I think we want to think broadly about what it takes to create value and to create returns in the next 10 years versus the last 10 years. Certainly, it's going to be different. If you look at the interest rates and the cap rates, it's very difficult to find multifamily deals in the same way that we did over the last 10 or 15 years. So because we know it's changing, we have to think outside the box. We have to think about what are ways that we can create returns for ourselves and for our investors. And there are projects that make money. There are projects that make sense. At least for us, we're finding that the outside of the box process takes a little bit more time, a little bit of skill, but there are great returns to be had. And so I would encourage everybody to really think hard about what makes the most sense to you and how do you create returns thinking outside the box a bit.
I'm trying to make that into a pun when you're talking about manufactured homes that are kind of a box. Think outside the box.
Right. Exactly.
That's a stretch. Okay. Anyway, so very good. As I ask everybody towards the end, is there a pivotal person or event that brought you to where you are today or that's making a push for you towards some particular goal?
Well, for me, it's an event. And this happened in 2014, I think. I think it was 2014. It was 2015, 2015. So at this particular time, I had a construction business and I was operating this construction business and we're doing an outdoor project, doing some grading on a site, installing some horizontal work. And it had rained. This is the wettest, I think it was in either March or April. And it was the wettest month, it was the wettest March or April in history. So it had rained almost nonstop for about 30 days, 29 or 30 days. So I hadn't had any ability to work. It was just literally muddy, couldn't do anything. And when you can't do work, you can't bill for work, right? And when you can't bill for work, you can't pay the bills. And when you can't pay the bills, that creates strain, strife, stress. And I remember sitting at this job site. I'd gone to the site to try to find something I could do, right? Anything that we could do to try to generate some progress. And it was futile. It was too muddy. Really couldn't do anything. So I remember it. I'm sitting in this skid steer and I'm sitting there just kind of head in my hands, trying to figure out what am I going to do? I'm down to, not much money left in the account. How are we going to make this happen? Who is there to blame, right? I needed somebody to blame for this thing because, obviously it couldn't be me, right? I didn't cause all of this. Who's to blame for this problem that I'm in? And it was a very interesting moment of realizing there wasn't anybody to blame. It was just me. I was the problem, but fortunately, I was also the solution. And realizing that there weren't people to blame for the things that were going on in my life, and that I needed to take greater ownership for all the things around me. And that was a complete light switch moment. And the trajectory of my financial success from that point forward was radically different.
Hmm.
And all I can attribute that to is just taking ownership of the things that happen around me. And there's nobody to blame. It all comes to me. And I'm happy to own that. And I'm happy to be in that position. What a great position to be in, to be the problem, but also the solution at the same time. And I like providing solutions. So that for me was a pivotal experience, completely changed my life.
Terrific. That's a great one too. Yeah, that's that's something that, yeah, is going to be a takeaway as well. So terrific. Well, so tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. Yeah, you can reach me on any of the channels, LinkedIn or Instagram, Charles Covey. Also go to our website, valorumcapital.com. There you can look at our real estate fund and also our blue collar business fund, acquiring blue collar businesses. So would love to chat with you. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm easy to find and would love to talk more.
Now, it just occurred to me as you were saying that, is there an author, Charles Covey, too?
There's Stephen Covey,
Steve?
and he's an author, has written all kinds of books, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and many sequels to that. So we are related. I think it's some distant cousin, according to my grandfather, who does all the genealogy, but I haven't met him
Oh, you should. That's pretty cool. He's definitely, yes, some a trailblazer.
for
Uh,
sure.
very good. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, and we will put contact information in the show notes. I want you to send me some pictures to put into the film, and we should have a good production here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.